the aliens. Mainly, he makes this connection, I think, because it was A-10s and Button's an A-10 pilot, but that's just my guess. But Button, hearing all of this stuff 4 years later that's going on about the Phoenix Lights, decides that he's going to blow the whole thing wide open, and the U.S. Air Force realizes that their only course of action is to kill him.
Of course.
Of course.
Aren't there better ways than this?
Well, here's the great thing. This is how he makes a lot of suppositions here, and this is the one I like the best, which is they decide to simply remotely control his plane and fly it into the mountainside for him, thus silencing him during this training run. So they make him do some weird behavior and then just fly away. The U.S. Air Force then, actually, I guess this kind of goes in two different directions. They could have flown it into the mountain in Colorado, or they could have just crashed his plane during the training mission.
That would have been simpler.
That would have been simpler because going all to Colorado is a giant pain in the butt. But then what they would do, remember, we found a plane in Colorado that was an A-10. They would have taken wreckage from an A-10 and deposited it onto the mountainside along with his body, and then later on, quote unquote, found it to then keep their whole story stitched together.
Easy.
How's this sound to you guys so far?
I don't know.
Well, go ahead.
I guess I would say, like, the zombie plane theory makes a lot of sense to me. This is something that they talk about. We talked about a little bit maybe with MH370. Know that they would have killed him and then remote controlled the entire time from takeoff to landing. They would
the
put
whole
a
time
dead
the plane,
body
it wasn't
in the
actually
plane.
Pilot controlled, as in pilot in the cockpit controlled.
Right, ever.
Yeah.
And that they would have done the whole mission so that the other people who were doing the mission could have corroborated the story that, oh yeah, he was totally in the air with us and he was alive, and then he went off and did his own thing, and like who knows what happened, and that none of them would be in on it, but that the higher ups would go and crash him into the side of the mountain, the closest mountains they could find, which is probably about Colorado.
Well,
No.
here's the deal.
Probably about Colorado.
Okay.
The closest uninhabited mountain?
You don't.
No.
There's mountains are not the only hard surface on the planet, believe it or not.
Turns out the planet itself is quite hard.
Yeah, and
Turns out.
and it turns out for something like that, if you really need to kill him, you just have your hitman stab him or strangle him. And in order to remote control a plane all the way to Colorado, you got to have somebody in the air with a controller, and you got to have somebody who installs it on the plane.
So there's a whole thing that there's a whole lot, and I have not heard of this. We are able to remotely control an A-10. You would think that you would not want to have that ability on a plane so that your enemy could not hijack your own plane against you.
Well, you're not going to leave that stuff just routinely installed. But that's my point, is that in order to remotely control one, you'll have to have a whole team of guys develop all this stuff and install it on the plane.
Just to take out one dude.
Or
technically, possibly take out two, as we're going to find out.
Yeah, maybe, but it'd be a lot easier just to put a bomb on the plane.
Yep.
Very easy to do. You can have
easier.
something that's detonated by an altimeter, and you only need one assassin to do that.
Yeah.
Or better still, just murder him in a parking lot somewhere. And that way you don't lose.
Claim it's a random crime.
Yeah, you don't lose an expensive airframe.
Okay, so we're all in agreement that this is kind of fetched in the farthest reaches of the land, but I'm going to keep going with it.
It's not actually as absurd as the idea that they killed him somewhere else and then they just got some random wreckage from an A-10.
Well, but let me keep going with this, because this is where this goes.
It's Warwick again. Right?
Warwick again. He is saying that, okay, what's an obvious clue that they planted this thing there? Well, one of the things is that the search helicopters, when they were looking for him, they saw paper fluttering around on the mountainside, and that's how they figured out, and then they saw the metal and they figured out they were in the right spot. And he says, well, how can there be paper there when he drove the plane into the mountain, and how would paper survive the obvious fireball that was going to happen?
Well, I guess more of my question is, like, how would paper survive the, onslaught of snow?
It was a map. Supposedly it was just flight maps that were just kind of blowing around.
But like snow and stuff.
I don't know that it had been snowing or if it was just really cold, crappy conditions, but they said that there was paper flying around. And it was supposedly a map.
Okay.
But if we keep going with this, they then say that because there's further evidence that this is going on, is that 2 weeks after after his accident, he dies. There is a U.S. Air Force captain named Amy Zvadova. I'm going to hope is how you pronounce her name. She died in a A-10 accident as well. And according to him, and this is totally according to work, I haven't seen this anywhere else, she was his trainer when he was in Texas.
Oh.
So this is a giant leap of faith that he is saying. Now, there's a lot of problems. Obviously, as we talked about, there's the whole remote controlling of a plane is really weird. And I also have to push back on there would have been this giant fireball, so there shouldn't have been any paper, because one of the things that you need to have for a giant fireball is a fuel source. When they did the math, they figured out that at the very most, when his A-10 crashed into the side of Gold Dust Peak, it had maybe 5 minutes of fuel left, if any. So this thing, he was running on empty, which means when he went in, there would have been some fire, but it wouldn't have been as if he went in with a full tank and it is a giant movie scene style explosion.
Yeah, that's
then incinerate everything.
Yeah, things don't explode, generally speaking, like they do in the movies.
No.
But autopilot is a thing, right?
Autopilot?
It is.
So,
Yeah.
like, the autopilot could have been switched on. It doesn't need to be remote control, like falling around.
Could have been autopilot.
It could have
sure.
been autopilot,
That's
and
what
then he could have just run out of fuel.
You're going into our next theory, actually.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so
Good
let's
segue.
go there, because the next theory is that he was incapacitated and or it was an accident. So the theory goes that there is talk that he suffered some kind of accident. We're pretty sure that it couldn't have been hypoxia, because that should have shown up in his blood work, as far as I understand it, at least.
That's what I heard,
But
too.
for some reason other than that, he was rendered unconscious, and the plane was on autopilot almost the entire time. Now, that's kind of easy to discount because of the fact that at the last 20 minutes or whatever it was, he was seen changing elevations, zigzagging back and forth, going through cloud formations. Like, that's not what an autopilot does.
Plus, autopilots don't shut off all your radios and your transponders.
Exactly. That's also a very, very good point. And if there was a problem, why wouldn't he have simply ejected the plane from the plane? Because, by the way, when you eject it sends out a beacon. You know, it's a come find me, rescue me kind of beacon automatically on purpose. Though I seem to remember somewhere that pilots of the A-10s could shut that off so that the enemy couldn't find them. But that's off the back of my head. I pulled that. I'm not sure exactly.
No,
But that would make sense.
It does make sense. I'm pretty sure that you can.
Yeah, but I mean, this whole, he had some kind of accident that incapacitated him, and then he flew on autopilot till he suddenly woke up, and then crashed into the mountain. It makes me think of like something that would happen in the epic chicken fight scene from Family Guy. You know, this is like one of those random things, and they fall through and they hit a plane, and something happens.
Yeah.
So it's really out there, and there isn't actually any evidence to support that it was just some random weirdo accident. I don't know. I mean, I want it to be just some random accident. I mean, I want it to be he was on autopilot and he came to and he realized he's out of fuel and he's trying to search for some place to land, but just nothing that really shows that's what he was doing. It doesn't make any sense because, like we talked about, he could have turned everything back on to find somewhere to go.
Yeah, he could have decided to go rogue and everything and somehow got lost in the clouds and didn't realize there was a mountain in front of him.
He could have misjudged his descent because, like we said, he hit 100 feet from the peak. He could have been, let's say he was out of fuel and he was just gliding. He may have thought, I've got this. Oh crap, I don't got this.
Yeah.
But then again, why not punch out? Why not get out of the airplane at that point? So, I don't know. It's really strange.
If he actually was in clouds, and didn't realize he was about to fly into a mountain, well, then boom.
That's a good point. If he was gliding through cloud cover thinking he was safe.
Yeah, he misjudged his position.
And it could have been he needed to be 100 feet to the right or to the left of where he impacted. Yeah, I mean, that's the end of did he commit suicide? Was he killed? Was it an accident?
I just don't like any of those.
I don't either, to be quite honest. I've ping-ponged all over the place on this one.
No, it's inexplicable. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to mystery number 2, which is what happened to the Mark 82s. So, the first theory of the Mark 82s is that he did not actually drop them. Like I said, the U.S. Air Force, they scoured everywhere and they don't find them. Ground penetrating radar, metal detectors. They're pretty sure that the weapons aren't armed. The reason I think that they believe they weren't armed is that if they had been armed upon impact,
they would have gone bluey.
They would have gone bluey, and that 2,000 pounds of munitions would have made a very big impact.
Oh, 500 pounds?
Well, no,
you mean 500 times 4?
500 times 4, exactly. Sorry, I was doing math. I'm not known for doing math.
You aren't.
I'm not. I admit it. But yeah, so it's that 2,000 pounds of munitions would have made a big hole in the ground, and
somebody would have reported that probably.
Well, they should have seen that.
It would have been
probably would have blown the snow off the ground. Yep. I'm guessing. Now, I went to the manufacturer's website because you could find this stuff on the internet to look up. What does the the Mark 82 do? And
it blows up.
It blows. They are engineered to blow up. Mm-hmm. But they make a crater that is anywhere from 15 to 30 feet in diameter, or 5 to 10 meters, and they make a crater that is anywhere from 3 to 13 feet deep, or 1 to 4 meters. So a single one makes that size hole. All 4 together should have made a really big hole. Mm-hmm. Now, something I will bring up, because this is something I thought about initially, was, well, what if the bombs didn't go off initially, but then in the crash and the heat of the fire, they went off? And that is something that can happen. There's a term, it's called cooking off. Cook off. And that is when an external heat source or thermal source affects a munition to the point that it sets it off. It makes it explode. Like, it falls into the burning hull of a ship, which happens in naval accidents, and eventually the fire causes those to go off, which is then a whole series of problems. Well, you would think that, except like we talked about, he had almost no fuel left on the plane.
Yeah.
So there wouldn't have been enough heat to cause cook-off, because these things are rated for 2.5 minutes of high temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
Well, plus also the bomb should have been torn off the wings when he hit, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. And those, what are we calling them?
The
grabber thingies?
The clamps?
The clamps, yeah.
The clamps!
The clamps.
Yeah.
Give them the clamps. Would have obviously been destroyed if a bomb
had
exploded.
Well, the wings should have been destroyed. There should have been evidence of the explosives in terms of residual chemicals. Should have been obvious when they analyzed the parts.
Yep.
None of that was there.
Should have been pieces of shrapnel laying around.
There should have been shrapnel a mile or so away.
But some closer, too.
Yes, so there's all these things that would indicate if they had gone off, and none of that indicates that was the case. And if they hadn't gone off, they should have just been laying in the wreckage. So that means that the didn't drop them theory is kind of on shaky ground. So we're now going to go into he did drop them.
Okay.
I read a really interesting article which pointed out a really good thing that I had not thought of at all, which is the effect of that 2,000 pounds of munitions on his fuel.
Not to mention the extra air drag.
Well, the drag is going to cost him fuel, and he probably could not have made it nearly as far as he did had those weapons been on board the whole time.
Now, he only traveled about 850 miles, though, right?
You know what? When I tracked it, I had it at 650, but I've seen it called 800 miles, so we're just going to stick with 800 miles.
Okay.
So, yes, he traveled about 800 miles total, which is, the range, we were looking this up earlier, the range of a fully fueled Warthog is something like 2,500 miles, so he obviously wasn't full of fuel.
Apparently not.
Yeah. So the likely answer here then, based on that fuel consumption issue, is that he must have dropped them. And these folks really point out, they make a good argument, which is that he probably dropped them right away because he was in an area that was known for being a practice range.
True.
So it's entirely possible that he could have dropped them unarmed. Let's say he dropped them unarmed and they fall into this firing range. They could have been buried by subsequent explosions from other bombs that are dropped in practice runs, or maybe they were hit, a direct hit set them off. I know the chances of that are really minute, but it's something that could have happened. But you wouldn't, and if they were live, good luck discovering that crater from the 8,000 craters that are next to it.
Yeah.
And saying this is obviously from Craig Button flight.
Yeah. The other thing too is these things have fins on them. They're gonna go in kind of like
at an angle
down, and they have a sharp little nose on them. Mm-hmm. They could just bury themselves in the ground.
Yeah.
They could. Actually, have you guys seen did you ever do any looking at the fins that are available for these things? Mm-hmm. What is it? The snake eye? Is that the one that they have? That is, it's this weird. It's this fin that you think of fins on a missile, and they're upright, and it kind of guides it. Well, this is
like
actually
on a dart.
They're a parachuting fin, and they create drag. They flare out. And the wind pushes them and it slows the bomb down.
Yeah, it's not exactly a parachute, but they flip out and there's four of them, and they're just same places as the fins would be, but they slow it down.
Yeah, and so it was really interesting. But that is one thing. If the Mark 82s were equipped with something like that, I wouldn't be as willing to say maybe they nosed it and buried themselves, because those fins are meant to slow them down.
I didn't see any mention that they had that special kind of.
They didn't mention anything in the reporting of what these things were equipped with, other than they were the basic Mark 82.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like that's what you would train with, right? You train with the cheapest.
Oh, yeah. You don't put the fancy things on there.
Right?
We're going to give you the fully decked out rig the first time. Good luck.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, they're, the snake eyes, I can't remember. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But,
the fins that we were talking about?
Yeah, those are for really, really low altitude.
They are in slow movements, because the idea, for everybody that's listening, the idea here is that if this fin is not there, the bomb will drop and strike the target fast enough that it will throw shrapnel back up into the plane that actually dropped it. So that's why they're slowing it down, to give the plane time to get away.
Exactly. And so,
at its low airspeed.
Yeah, so he was only into his A-10 training course for, 2 months?
2 months. So he's probably, and this was his first live ammo run.
Yeah.
Chances are good he wasn't running those.
No. Yeah, it was not a low-level one. Yeah. Okay.
So which means that they should have had enough speed. Possibly in a very tilled up gunnery range, the things could have very easily buried themselves.
Yeah.
But that doesn't explain why then they would say that it didn't look like the racks had been disengaged. So
I don't know. The more credible sources I've seen say that the racks look like the bombs have been dropped.
And I would believe that, but the racks not being disengaged idea leads us into our last sub-theory of what happened to the Mark 82s, and that is he sold them or gave them away theory. And you will see this out there occasionally, and this is one of those theories that gets bandied about, and when it comes up, it's usually followed by the name of that person's favorite terrorist organization, and the theory basically goes, Craig Button, he flies somewhere, he lands, they unload the bombs, and then he takes off. Okay, why he then takes off and flies into a mountain? Well, maybe he wasn't actually on the plane. Maybe he did actually punch out and he had a dead body in the cockpit, or maybe he, was a pig or a decoy or something like that. So he got away a la DB Cooper. But, you would think, well, the U.S. Air Force should know that the ejection seat is gone and this is a pig. But then again, hell, if we're going to keep going this way, maybe they're in on it, and so they're covering the whole thing up, which adds even more layers of absurd complexity to this whole story.
Well, the cockpits in these things are not exactly roomy. You
No!
can't exactly, and also smuggling a corpse across the airfield and climbing into the plane with it, with nobody noticing it.
Yeah.
What I was getting at is that when he stopped at his clandestine
that's when
airport
they loaded
drop,
the extra corpse in.
that's when they loaded in the extra corpse, and hell, maybe he did some fancy MacGyver WYSIWYG stuff with a computer, and phew, it took off on autopilot by itself, and then the pig woke up, and the pig was steering the plane, and that's why it went back and forth.
No, that only makes sense.
Wilbur realized that there was a problem.
Yeah. I guess that was kind of the reason I was asking, like, was he an exceptionally talented pilot? Was it possible that the Air Force was looking to do something kind of clandestine, and they were looking for somebody to
and he was
mission,
tapped for that?
And he's tapped for that, and they said, we're going to pay you a bunch of money, just get out of here. I don't think it's likely, but, that was, I guess, why I was kind of asking.
I gotcha.
So he went off and bombed, like, a cannabis farmer or something like that.
Well, or just, they were trying to do it. Or they were trying to sell these munitions or whatever, that he flew.
It was some black book operation of some kind.
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't.
It seems really unlikely.
It
but
sure
literally
does,
everything in this entire story seems super unlikely. So I guess I'm just as willing to say, my UFO theory is that he was abducted by aliens, and they stole the munitions because they wanted to investigate what humans were capable of. And then they dropped him back into airspace, and suddenly he was like, I don't know where I am. I don't know what's going on. I just got abducted by aliens. Into the side of the mountain.
Well, if we're going to go with that, then he should also be shouting, and why is this big chicken punching me?
Yeah.
Because that's just as likely.
Well, they're all just as likely.
Well, actually, there's another possibility.
Okay.
Maybe he took something, like, and don't laugh. There's always ergot, of course. But also,
sorry, I wasn't supposed to laugh.
Also, he could have eaten some mushrooms, not realizing that they were the special kind, or something like that, or somebody slipped him some LSD.
Yeah,
there's always all kinds of weird. There's stuff like that can cause a psychotic break.
Not outside the realm of possibility.
Absolutely no evidence, of course.
Thank you.
And of course, they didn't find anything in his bloodstream.
Yep.
So
that's the hard part.
In fairness, though, it doesn't always take drugs to have a psychotic break. He could have had a psychotic break.
Yeah,
it's true.
He could have thought that he was being chased. That's why
could have been hallucinating in some way, shape, or form.
Doing these evasive maneuvers and through the clouds and stuff like that. But it doesn't explain where the bombs went or anything. So
yeah, but maybe the bombs will turn up.
Maybe.
They scoured those lakes, every lake around there, for example. That would have been a logical place for him to drop the bombs.
It would have.
In a lake. It totally would have. But most lakes and places like that tend to have very silty bottoms. They could vary, and it took them a long time to get around to searching those things.
But they were it wasn't as they had divers, they were using equipment, metal detectors and stuff like that. You think that they would have found them.
Well,
and I know
they had metal detectors? They had metal detectors then.